Hey everybody and welcome back to This is the Year, the Swiss AI podcast, and yet another episode with you, the AI wizard, Joao. How is Portugal treating you? Before we get into some topics today. By the way, before we go to you, Joao, today we're talking about how to get featured on the news when you're launching an AI product. We talk about agentic RAG and also some Google topics and the MENA region. So back to you to Lisbon. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you for asking. We got a minor surgery last week, so I was a bit down, a bit in pain, but now everything's better. Super quick recovery, and back to the AI world. I mean, I did nothing except look at AI news on Reddit and like online to see what is happening. I mean, I had nothing else to do, so I'm pretty up to date.
So we are raising the bar on expectations on your end today. And to the audience, apologies. We usually upload every single week, and this is kind of a promise we're trying to keep. Only then last week we didn't really upload. But today we're back with a roster of topics. So why don't we get it started maybe with the first one, and I tease it at the very beginning, especially if you are building a new AI product specifically tailored for B2C, so actually private individuals, you would have initially a growth problem because you have this great idea. It's maybe sitting somewhere on an internet website, or it's maybe still on your local device, but you want to get it started and you want to get it launched to the wider audience in the world, basically. And I just thought it makes maybe sense to quickly deep dive how we launched our own image generator a little bit over 2 years ago, and how did we go about it being featured on the bigger, even not the biggest news outlets in Switzerland, in Austria, in Germany, and occasionally also in France. And of course, if you're completely new to actually building and then launching an AI product, you have to somewhat reverse engineer to generate a little bit of momentum. So keep in mind, this particular domain that I'm now talking to about is basically just the news coverage, but at the same time, ideally we'd also maybe work with TikTok influencers, with Instagram influencers, and maybe actually with forums and other avenues, basically. But this particular notion is how to get featured on the news. So what we did is basically fairly simple, and it's still replicatable, I would say, today, all these years later. And then let me loop you in, Joao, for your comment, if that still works today. What we basically did is we initiated like a bit of a research which featured newspapers do we want to target, and based on that we had investigated where these journalists are basically sitting. So as an example, one journalist talked about an AI topic, another journalist maybe criticized an AI topic, a third one is still somewhat unsure if AI is good or bad. And then we actually contacted these journalists directly. That's still something I would say you can do today. You have to a little bit catchy on the mail that you're actually sending to these journalists, but then potentially they're actually getting in touch with you, and then potentially, of course, ideally, then they're featuring your product as well. This is what we did with dozens, if not hundreds of journalists in the region that we covered. So once again, identifying the journalists, try to reverse engineer their email at some point, because that's not publicly visible. So you have to know the email.
So do a bit of online stalking.
Exactly.
That's what you mentioned. I mean, it's still better than initially when you're talking about it. I thought you were just going physically up to the journalist, like on a coffee shop.
That would be a bit,
talking about your company. But that's way, I think, more agreeable and nicer to everyone if you send them an email first.
I think it's mostly somewhat, I think, an overlooked element, because people usually are trying to front load a lot of the work on the articles. But if you're actually reaching a journalist because you have some specific unique idea, it's actually a lot more easier to then get featured indirectly without paying anybody, or even to not only write your own article. So that's usually the way we approach it at the beginning. It's been, a little bit over 2 years now, but we talked to all these journalists via email over a few weeks when we initiated the launch. And then when we pressed play, basically, all these different articles got mentioned. One thing also to maybe worth mentioning, once you're in one newspaper, it's very easy to get into the second, the third, and the fourth, because you can then send these journalists the featured news article you had with the other newspaper. So it's a bit of a chain reaction, but I thought it makes maybe sense to also mention it once on this podcast, how to get featured on the news. Once again, contact journalists, a lot of them, to try to do that in an interactive way. Would that still work to you in today's world, Joao? What do you think?
I mean, I think it could. I think it's a bit of an initial effort to get that first article published. I get the initial like outreach. Well, once you get the first one, like the first contact, you get used to it. I think especially builders, I mean, I've been an engineer since forever, and I think usually engineers and like builders have this lack of skill, like reaching out to people, especially like doing the marketing part. Like we build awesome clean code, deploy it on whatever cloud we want, but then actually talking to people about what we built in a way that's appealing, doing the sales. Some people do sales, some people do code. I think very few people are very good at both. But it is like a very good skill to have. And if you start to reach out,
it is a highly valuable one. I mean, you need both at the same time. And I mentioned it before I actually got started with this particular argument, that you need to do probably many things at the same time. So certainly have a list maybe on TikTok influencers you would like to collab, maybe a few preset LinkedIn articles, and maybe you can ask your friends or your co-builders to actually share it. Then you do the outreach on the journalists, and once you get the momentum wheel a little bit flowing on news articles, maybe 1 or 2 coming in, then the whole system is a lot easier to then scale up, because you can use these news articles on your website. You can then reference your website on the subsequent articles and the subsequent emails to the journalists. So it's a little bit the initial momentum, and you can certainly like plan back from your launch date, maybe 3 to 4 weeks before. You're starting to plant the seeds basically into all these journalists and all these news outlets. And then once you're actually pressing play, you might actually be invited, like we were back then, into TVs, into different interviews, and then it just starts to flow naturally. And I still see occasionally a new launch of a product on LinkedIn, and suddenly there is no momentum behind. So there's actually a lot of thinking that you need to do to initially business develop your opportunity to success. That's a little bit what we, just looking back now, I would say, which is one of the probably more overlooked elements when you're launching an AI startup or an AI idea at the very beginning. Sure, let's pivot maybe to the second topic that you brought actually today. We have a new model, K2. I think maybe you can quickly introduce the audience. What is it all about, and what it has to do with the Middle East region?
So we go from marketing to lies. The model is real. The model exists. It's from the UAE. It's one of the now many open source models out there. Models that you can go online, deploy it, like download it to your computer, deploy it if your computer is good enough, or you can just rent a server somewhere that's cheap enough and deploy it there. And usually, free to choose one in amongst those many models, you go look at the benchmarks. Like you go see how good the models are. Usually newer the better, not always, but that's reasonably the case. And so you'd think, okay, this model just came out, it might be good. The benchmarks that they posted and benchmarks that came out, it were putting this K2 Think model, not the Kimi K2, which is a very similar name, but very different model. Kimi K2 is from a Chinese company, and this is from the UAE. It puts right next to GPT-OSS 120B. So in other words, the best open source model or open source-ish model from OpenAI that we talked about, I think, 2 or 3 episodes ago. And so one of the top players in the game. So to launch a new model, new open source model, and it's right up there benchmark-wise to the top open source model of the moment, you'd think that's a great model to use.
It's a big success.
People are suspicious. And so, they start to investigate, like, is this model that good? And it appears that the guys that were building this K2 model got their hands on the dataset, and they trained the model on the benchmark dataset. So basically, the model knew the answers to the questions in the training dataset. They spiked the data, and so they were cheating or faking the benchmarks. It's not that the model is bad per se, but it's just the whole point of the benchmarks is like it's the same point of you taking a test in school. If you know the answers, if you know the questions and answers already, it's not really a test. It's just like a memory game, and it doesn't really allow you to compare like your knowledge to the rest of your classmates. And that's what happened. So is this a big news? I mean, they're probably not the first ones to do this. I have accused other companies of doing it in the past. Now I think they've admitted it officially that they did it. It'll happen again. It'll keep happening. The point is, there are a lot of open source models. You have to choose amongst them. It becomes increasingly harder to choose what open source model to use in your operation, in your use case, if there is no reliable way to compare them. If there's no reliable way to say, is this model good? Because there's a lot of different benchmarks. It's hard, but not impossible, to cheat on all of the benchmarks. But also, you don't care about all of the benchmarks. If you're launching a model to analyze, for example, healthcare data, you really don't care how good it is at physics or how good it is at coding. You can analyze how good it is at addressing your prompt, so how obedient it is, and also maybe knowledge on healthcare and medical knowledge. There are benchmarks for that, but again, you hope that they're not faking the results or not spiking the training data set. Which leads us to more bullshittery that's happening in the world of AI, which is these third-party providers. So we talked about You're going online, you find a model that you like, the benchmarks sound good, you download it, you run it. But wait, your computer is not good enough, so you go online and you rent a server. There are already quite a few different companies that we call them third-party providers or just inference providers, which are basically like small-scale AWS or small-scale clouds that allow you to pull a model and use a model that's already deployed on their servers. And they have a list of models that they already deploy. Usually they keep up to date, or you can select what model you want to deploy from their list, and you can use it. And they're usually pretty cheap. They're all competing to be the cheapest like cost per token. And that's the thing. Because they're competing to be the cheapest cost per token, they're sometimes, not always, but sometimes they're using quantized versions of the models. Which means for you, the user, that you can have the same exact model on 10 different providers and you'll get different results. And this started to come out a few days ago, I think, online on forums. I think it might break out to some places on X or Twitter. It might go mainstream in a few days. But the news is that these providers are a bit lying on what models you're deploying. It's fine to use quantized versions. I mean, it's a great technology that allows, for those who don't know what is a quantized model. Cyril, do you know what is a quantized model? Can you explain it in a way that our audience can pick up?
I will try to distill it a little bit. I mean, basically, it's like let me try to put it in a way that these very, very large models have multiple, maybe hundreds of billions of parameters, and then you can basically try to optimize the parameter count and reduce and condense it to be a little bit more, let's say, smaller in that sense, and it's more efficient to run it. Even in the very large models, like for example GPT series or the Claude series, they use mixture of experts anyway, so they don't have all the parameters active at all time anyways. So this is also a way to maybe optimize the compute itself. You don't want to use and do inference on all the parameters at the same time. But quantized version is maybe going one step even further. Do they not only have all the parameters available, they have it a little bit even more condensed. So it's a little bit like a filtering out to really bring it down to the most relevant part. Is that an adequate explanation, Joao?
It is. One of the main techniques of quantizing is also sometimes just the equivalent of using less decimal places. So usually each number takes 32 bits or 16 bits, and just try to use less and less space for each number. So it's like saying pi is equal to 3.14 instead of saying pi is equal to 3.14 1592. I googled what the digits for pi are. I don't know them out of the top of my head. Basically, so you're trying to make the model more efficient, and it's a really great way. I mean, you're getting sometimes 90%, 95% of the performance, and the model is half the size, which is amazing. If you could get like a car that's 95% of a Lamborghini for half the price of a Lamborghini, you'd buy a few dozen. Maybe you'd get a bank loan for it, but it would be still a very good business. Same thing applies to these models. It's good that there are quantized versions. It's not good that you don't know that they're quantized. So you're choosing between the inference providers, you see that the model that you want is available, you click on it, you deploy it, and then the performance is sometimes it's a bit below what you expect, sometimes it's really, really different because you can quantize it more or less. So you can make the model really, really light, so either fast or just cheap to run, but it also becomes dumber and dumber every time, and at a certain point it stops being useful for you. And there's this place called Open Router, which is a very popular place for you to get your inference from. And basically what it does is it routes your request to one of many different providers. And people were noticing that sometimes the same request was getting very different results. And it's fine for you to ask a question to an LLM and get different answers. I mean, we've all done that on ChatGPT. But now they were seeing like different performance, like actual different performance. Like sometimes the model was noticeably dumber. And they started to look into it. They ran their own benchmarks. They ran their own tests on the same different providers, the same exact questions, and they noticed this difference. I mean, you can go online, we can post some links in the description, but now you know, and especially if you're doing a use case, what I usually say is the best benchmark for your use case is your use case. So you try to run your project using that LLM and you see if it works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, you can always change your LLM, or you should be able to change it in the code fairly easily. Because no benchmark is going to replicate exactly what you're doing. If it is, you have a really weird use case for an LLM.
I mean, the benchmark is just probably the first step to get an analysis in which LLM you would want to choose. Maybe if you're completely new to the world of large language models, there is a website called Artificial Analysis. Maybe I can put it on the screen as well. They
Yes,
give
there
you
is.
the initial menu on different LLMs, and again, most of the publicly available benchmarks, they have a set of their own. But that's probably the first, I would say, touch point when you would want to check first before you maybe select an LLM. And then second, as you mentioned, Joao, you would then go for your proprietary tests, proprietary evaluations, or short evals based on your actual subset of tasks. So for example, a certain LLM might be super intelligent, but it's maybe a little bit performing worse than a less intelligent one on a particular finance, legal, or healthcare task. So you anyway need to run your domain-specific evaluations and not rely on these benchmarks. I think one student just this week, we had the kickoff of my new AI class at uni, and one student asked, are these models trained on these benchmarks, or is there some sort of relationship between the benchmarks and the models performing so incredibly well on these? And then certainly it's a bit of a marketing procedure anyway, because to the mainstream media, these benchmarks seems to be the holy grail, but to most of them going a little bit further than the mainstream, it's just one of the very first entry points to actually select a large language model. It's a bit like a test at the university. The test domain specifically validates how good you know a particular set of questions, but it doesn't really tell how intelligent you are as a human being. It's a little bit the same with these benchmarks. Some are really good, like humanities last exam seems to be very complicated, and some others seems to be fairly straightforward and not too difficult for most of the modern PhD level LLMs as well. So that's a little bit on the benchmarking. I am personally still incredibly bullish to paint the bull case for MENA region, so Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, and other countries in the region. They are building incredible data centers. They have a great ecosystem, and I'm truly excited also what they can bring to the world in terms of new models. This was the first attempt, maybe a little bit of a marketing coup as well, Joao.
So maybe a bit of a marketing, also mishap, because well, they were found out.
Exactly. So let's see what the journey for them brings. I was just visiting the region, I think every year the last years, and it's still really interesting to see what extent of technological developments they are going through each and every single year, also in the domain of artificial intelligence. Why don't we wrap it up maybe with Google VO3? We had a quick friendly argument before we started the podcast on VO3 being everywhere. Joao mentioned they're using as more or less a filtering on Google, on YouTube Shorts. So Google uses a little bit of an AI filtering when YouTube Shorts is being distributed. You made the theory, maybe rightfully so, that Google is trying to educate humans to be used to consuming AI generated content. But
I don't remember using the term educate, but that's a very polite way of describing it. So I was calling out Google, and I think other people did. It's not my original point of view, but I saw it a long time ago, and I still agree with it, is that they changed the way shorts look so that every single short, or most of shorts, look like they were created by Gen AI. Not even the latest iteration of video models, like where videos are super realistic. Like all videos had that kind of filter that like the color is just a bit off, and like everything is super clean. Like you look at the skin of people and everything, like it's a video game. And they did it before announcing like integrating VO3 into shorts. So like they did it for a couple of weeks, I think, like 2 to 3 weeks. And people were starting to notice, like it did not go unnoticed. People were in the comments saying these videos at Gen AI, and then people had to correct it. Well, it's not, but yeah, like the YouTube Shorts now look kind of weird. And people were making the case that it's for like the encoding and decoding of the video. It makes it faster. Like they're just optimizing the algorithm because the videos are kind of expensive to run, and so they have billions of users. They want to run it as cheaply as possible. I could agree with it, but they have had YouTube for almost a decade now. Like Google bought YouTube a long time ago. They have probably like one of the best teams in video encoding and transcoding. They know how to make videos light without making it look like Gen AI. It was intentional to make it look like Gen AI because they want to make people get so used to everything looking like Gen AI that they can tell apart what's an actual filmed video and a Gen AI created video. And that's my I don't want to say conspiracy theory because it's so reasonable that I don't want to call it a conspiracy, but that's my theory.
I mean, it's probably a really good guess in terms of filtering these videos, in the sense that, yeah, we are getting used to consuming that content. I think I would maybe take the other camp, that many of the content platforms, they are currently at least trying to pinpoint to more real content as opposed to more Gen AI generated content. That's a little bit what I believe. Like in a future, where's the actual value? Okay, maybe in the long term future, yes, but in the short term future, if there's all these bad AI videos, so if they're getting really really good, then yeah, possibly each of us gets a tailored version of what we are actually aiming to look at, maybe. So that could be an interesting one as well. Yeah.
Because weeks later, like they introduced these filters, they performed those, and then weeks later they introduced, I think maybe now a week ago, View 3 is now free to use on YouTube Shorts. You can turn whatever text you want into 8-second clips of videos. And I was saying to Cyril, they're just trying to boost YouTube Shorts as a platform as much as possible, fill it with as much content as possible. Try to make people like always have something to see, because you're doom scrolling, like you're seeing maybe like 1,000 videos in a single session, because you're scrolling away at the next one, you see a couple seconds of each one. And so they want to have more content. And even though there's a lot of people going to content creation, ourselves included, this is not, I think, enough to feed the database, like the level of content that they want to have. And so they want more AI slop.
I mean, it's more customization as well, right? So if you as a user, you don't get recommended, so based on the recommender engine, a piece of content, but you can actually self-create it with a bunch of keywords. I think we're probably heading there anyway. In 26, 27, you open the platform, you kind of indicate what you want to see, and then maybe there's a recommender engine from video to video, and they're all being AI generated, and you get tailored to whatever you want to see, as opposed to the AI system or the old school ML system finding on this kind of maze of many billions of videos what you really want to see. So maybe it's even more efficient from their algorithmic and compute side if they can regenerate it, as opposed to go find what you might be interested in, to again stay on the platform, keep consuming, and then on top they can feed you the AI generated ads as well. I mean, it's kind of a cyberpunk future for sure.
Cyril's initial theory, actually, before we started recording the show, was that they were trying to show off VO3 as a model. So like businesses start to use VO3 more, like just in general, for marketing, for ads, for whatever, like to sell VO3. My idea is just to boost the Shorts platform. I think both might be true. It's just, we had that discussion, I think a couple of years ago, when we started having the AI models, is we talked about having entire AI films, like movies made by AI, written, directed, and produced by AI. And there was an uproar, like people were not that into it. Basically because even though you can write what you want to see, most people are not going to be as good of writers or as creative as people who do it full time. I mean, movie writers are, like, that's a job for a reason. Not all of them are super good, but there's a lot of really good, really creative movie writers. And so I think it kind of narrows down your scope of what kind of movies you'd see, because instead of you going to the movies and you don't know what to expect and you see Inception, it's like a mind-blowing movie with like inserting maybe new concepts to you. You go to the movies and you're like, oh, I want to see explosions and cars. And you get a dumbed-down version of Fast and Furious. Maybe that's the future. Maybe both can coexist. But I think I'd like to see, and I'm not even that much of a movie person. I mean, I like them, but I'm not that much knowledgeable in the movie industry. I'd like to see, I keep seeing new innovative movies from movie writers that like are just breaking barriers and just not regenerating very similar contents and creating the thing just for you.
But I think maybe that's coming if I look ahead. Tailored movies. Now we maybe can start with tailored shorts, as you mentioned now with VO3. Maybe 2026 probably will be even better. And then maybe we can get to these longer form, even virtual worlds or actual movies. Great show. Any other topic from your end for the show today?
We're starting to see a bit of a slowdown in new LLMs, which is fine. I'm hoping to see a new major version of Gemini soon. I was hoping to see it before the end of the year, but it's yet to be seen. When GPT-5 was released, the hype for new major LLMs died down a bit. So every major company is a bit hesitant to launch their new LLMs. I think they're just holding out.
Now is the time to actually use them. I mean, in terms of level of intelligence, I think we more or less reached a really good level to build many complex systems. Now it's about combining them, making sure the context engineering is done properly, and yeah, just basically make actual value creation based on these models, not just in theory, but also in the real world. Great. So, gentlemen, that was the episode that we tried to catch up. Hopefully this week we can shoot another one with you, Joao, so we can slowly catch up to the one that we missed. Generally on this channel, we talk about all these topics that we covered today, from scaling and launching AI products to engineering topics to maybe some trends of new models. and just usually the best guess of what we see while building these agentic systems as well. So yeah, thank you, Joao, for joining. I'll see you in the
Thank
next
you.
one. Take care. Bye-bye.
See ya.